A battle to the death. Classic albums clashing till there's only one left. A killer contest, but before we get to it, there's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it. 8 classic albums, 1 classic year. Draw 'em out the hat and chew the fat right here. We rate 'em, relate 'em, discuss 'em and debate 'em, analyze the beats and quote the lyrics verbatim. When all is said and done, we put it to the vote and tell you which of them is one. Then it's to the semis and the final for the vinyl cassette or CD. So who will it be? We going all in, so on the sound of the whistle, let the games begin.
Record shot. To the hip, the hop, you don't stop.
Hello and welcome to Hip Hop World Cup, the podcast that pits golden age hip hop albums against each other in a contest to find the ultimate champion. I'm your host, Danny Phillips, and joining me as ever are Steve Hitchcock. How you doing, Steve?
Yeah, good. Hi, everyone.
And James Larry Luscombe. How you doing?
Hello, mate. Yeah, good, thanks.
Good stuff. Now, in this episode, we are looking at perhaps the greatest year in hip hop history.
Greatest.
1994. It's a year that saw loads of great albums released, but not just that, it saw loads of masterpieces released. It's generally regarded as the year for hip hop, when everybody was at their peak, at the height of their powers. We've been looking forward to doing this episode for a while, chaps. How are you feeling? You excited? You hyped up to be looking at the 94 albums? Steve?
Oh yeah, I've been excited about this episode. I think since we began this, so many rappers and producers in their prime, boom bap sound. East versus West is kind of like really evenly balanced here. This is just going to be such a brutal World Cup. There's going to be so many great battles. Can't wait for this episode.
Yeah, you're looking forward to getting your teeth into these, Larry?
Oh, yeah, absolutely the same. Yeah, I've been looking forward to it since day one, hence why we've kept the best to last, really.
Absolutely, yeah. we save the best to last, definitely. For this one of the final episodes in this series, we've left our studio once again at FIFA HQ, and we've taken the show on the road. This episode, we're at the Rose Bowl Stadium in Pasadena, California, venue of the 1994 World Cup final between Brazil and Italy. So no expense spared. We've blown all the budget again, chaps. What a wonderful town, wonderful city. We're in a box high up in the stadium, looking down onto the pitch.
It's a packed stadium as well, isn't it?
Packed stadium, yeah, packed stadium. Even with COVID protocols in place, everybody's just crammed in to see this spectacle. They've all been waiting for it. This, of course, the '94 World Cup is obviously best known for when Diana Ross infamously missed a penalty in the opening ceremony. She missed the goal, but the goal still split in half for some reason. I think in hindsight, perhaps it would have been better to ask somebody else to take that penalty. Perhaps Fife from the Tribe Called Quest, because as we know, famously, he can kick it.
He can, and he's quite sporty, isn't he, as well?
Absolutely, yeah. Can I just get your thoughts on that joke, chap? Steve, let's start with you.
I didn't see that coming, actually. That was rather good. Yeah, well done.
Yeah, thanks. Larry, thoughts?
Yeah, no, well, I mean, you can tell by my laughter how much I liked it.
It was a big clue as to your reaction. So, okay, well, let's get into how this show's going to work, shall we? So, because 1994 was such a massive year for hip-hop, FIFA has decided to expand this World Cup to 16 albums, spread across 2 episodes of the Hip Hop World Cup. So what we've done, obviously, we've whittled it down to 16 of the best albums in our eyes from the year 1994, split them into 2 groups, and we're going to do each group in turn. In this episode, we're going to look at the round 1 matches, largely the albums that lost, but so we're going to be focusing on those in this episode. But, if for any reason you don't know the full rules of the Hip Hop World Cup and how it all works, here's a quick recap from our official commentator.
Ladies and gentlemen,
it's the Hip Hop World Cup. Rules to the shit. Hip Hop World Cup. Rules to the shit.
There's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it.
It's the Hip Hop World Cup. Rules to the shit. Only the strong survive. It's the Hip Hop World Cup.
So here are the rules. Using a scientific process of shortlists and horse trading, Danny, James and Steve agree on a list of 8 albums from the chosen year, which will compete for the Hip Hop World Cup. In each round, our pundits draw the albums from a hat to decide who plays who. Then discuss each match and vote for the album they want to win. Albums with the most votes progress through the rounds to the final, where the lads vote again to decide which album is the undisputed Hip Hop World Cup champion. Let the games begin.
Turning our attention to this World Cup then, Larry, and True Score.
Yeah.
I mean, I pretty much expect you've had to really prime it for this show. Are you confident it can cope?
There's a bit of an explanation. It's been a little bit problematic. As you know, True Score is a very heavy-duty industrial piece of kit. It's got the might of British Leyland behind it. So, by definition, very few things can go wrong. That being said, 94 was always going to be a big challenge, even for the Mark III system with the upgraded cylinders. The long and short of it, really, is that the engineers had to come and take it away this week for what they described as a belt and braces refurbishment. They have made promises about getting it back to me like in better condition than ever for the grand finale. And the good news is they have managed to kind of give me a sort of alternative system. Some people kind of would say it's the next best thing. Others might say it's even better. It's actually a late 1980s digital system. It's not a Leyland. It's actually a disc-based system. It's based on the old RM Nimbus computers. They used to have them like in schools to teach sort of IT skills.
Like Granny's Garden.
That had sort of very little application in the real world. And yeah, honestly, the processing power in these things is absolutely incredible. It can process a song every single hour.
Wow.
If you can imagine that. So
and takes about 2 hours to load. Is that right?
Takes 2 hours to load up. That's if you're successful on the first attempt, because obviously it's you do get you get a bit of dust in the drives of these old things, but once it's up and loaded, it absolutely flies, and it really crunches the numbers like you wouldn't believe. So yeah, it's been a real boon to have it.
Right. Well, we're looking forward to seeing how
I don't know if I want to go back to the old system, but yeah, we'll see.
This will be this is kind of the guinea pig episode for it. Then that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So let's move on to some of the honourable mentions for 1994. Obviously, with 16 albums, there's not going to be a lot of those because most of them got in anyway. But before we move on to that, just to read another email we received.
Oh yeah.
From one of our regular listeners who writes. Dear Hip Hop World Cup, love the show. However, even though I don't know which albums you've chosen for the 1994 episode, I'm outraged that you haven't included A Constipated Monkey by Curious. This slept-on banger features dope lyricism from Curious and some of the Beatnuts' best production from the era. Can't believe this didn't get in, and other inferior albums probably did. You guys are a joke. Yours sincerely, Kevin Keegan. P.S. I would love it if you talked about it. Harsh words there from Kevin, big fan of the show from the sounds of it, but a little bit put out by this. But he does have a point. Curious, A Constipated Monkey, great album, and we can reveal now it's not in our 16. Do you agree with Kevin, lads? Is that fair?
You probably would have expected to see it in there, I suppose.
No, this is such a brutal World Cup. I think the 16 that are in are a good choice. There's one album we have to talk about in a minute that's not in, but yeah, I agree with Kevin. It's a good album, but sorry, Kevin, you don't always get what you want. You don't always win the league. You don't always get your albums in there.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I would 100% agree with you. But when you look at maybe 1-2 of the albums that did get in, I'm starting to think maybe Kevin had a bit of a point. But let's drill down into what your honourable mentions are then, Steve. Any albums that didn't make it that you would like to have seen in?
Yeah, I'm going to say really cross the KMD album didn't get in. Black B Words, because you two were adamant that it was not released in 1994. Yeah. So it was made and was supposed to be released in 1994, but didn't because of its album content and album front cover. And it's just a superb album. It would have done really well in this World Cup because I know Larry.
Yeah, I love it. I would have liked to have seen it in there as well, but I do think I stand by the fact that it wasn't released in 94, therefore it's not really a 94
I mean
album.
there are volumes upon volumes of rules at the FIFA headquarters where that is explained in very minute detail as to why that's not allowed.
I think I needed a bigger bribe. That's where I went wrong.
Yeah, possibly.
That might have done it.
But yeah, I mean it can't go in. Them's the rules. So that was yours. Larry, any you'd like to have seen in?
No, not that I can recall really. No, I think
They all made the cut.
I think everything made the cut for me.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, there was just one I think that was kind of on the periphery of getting in for me. I agree with Kevin. A Constipated Monkey by Curious was one of my faves from back in the day. Uptown Shit is one of my favourite hip hop tracks. The only other one I'd mention was Gravediggers.
Gravediggers.
Rigor Mortis, or 6 Feet Deep as it was called in the US. Absolute banger. Great, loads of great tracks on there. 1-800 Suicide, Diary of a Madman.
Yeah, amazing.
Love that album to bits, but there's a few crap tracks on there. I can see why it didn't make it, but yeah, I think some people would wonder why that one wasn't in.
What about There's a Dark Side?
Yeah, a much loved album.
Good.
People say it's Redman's best. I never got on board with it. I don't know about you, Larry and Steve, but
Yeah, no, it's a good album. Outkast's first album was also released this year. Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music. That's a pretty good album, actually.
yeah, absolutely. And also we should mention obviously DFC's Things in the Hood, which came out in '94. So yeah, lots of absolute bangers didn't make it. But anyway, look, I think we're quite happy with our 16 that we've arrived at. Should we start talking about the ones that did make it through? Okay, so as per usual, the round one matches were drawn. The matches came out of the hat like this, and here are your the 16 albums that made it through. We have Casual's Fear Itself versus Coolio's It Takes a Thief. Gangstar, Hard to Earn versus the Beatnuts. The Notorious B.I.G, Ready to Die versus Jeru, the Damajas, The Sun Rises in the East. That's a big East Coast battle there. And Common Sense, Resurrection versus Thug Life's Volume 1. So those were the Group 1 games. And in the other group, we have Paris' Guerrilla Funk versus Warren G's Regulate, the G-Funk era. Murder Was the Case soundtrack versus Pete Rock and CL Smooth's The Main Ingredient. The third match in Group 2 is OC's Word Life versus Nas, Illmatic, two huge lyricists going up against each other there. And the last game, Group 2, is House of Pains, Same As It Ever Was versus Tikal by Method Man. So that's how the draw breaks down, chaps. It's pretty good, pretty strong lineup, 16 amazing albums. Quick thoughts on that before we get stuck into them?
Great ties there. Some really good
there was
ties.
some really hard ones, weren't there? Where you just feel so bad for having to knock one of them out before we even get to the main stage.
Absolutely. Yeah, big ties. Big ties. Okay, so that's your lineup. Join us after this short break and we'll get stuck into round one.
World Cup, round one. World Cup, round one. World Cup, round one. World Cup, round one.
Hello, welcome to round one in the Hip Hop World Cup 1994. To get things moving along, the round one matches were drawn and played earlier today, giving us a chance to talk in greater detail about losing albums, more in round one, and then we'll discuss the winners in greater detail in our next episode. So in Group 1, the first game out of the hat was Casual's Fear Itself versus It Takes a Thief by Coolio, two West Coast albums. And the result of this one was 2-1 to Casual, with myself and Steve both voting for Casual's Fear Itself, and Larry with the sole vote for Coolio's It Takes a Thief. Larry, I know you love this album to bits. Tell me why it got your vote.
Yeah, I mean, do you not want to go back on your vote that you gave for Casual at all?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I don't, and I will explain why in a minute.
You
but
stand by it,
I do stand by it. But I want to hear a bit more about why you're such a staunch Coolio fan.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know, everyone's got a top 10 album, I think, that raises like other people's eyebrows. And this is like obviously mine. Like me and my mate Dave, who's obviously like a friend of the show, mentioned quite a few times.
We need to get him on.
We used to just listen to this like constantly, like probably every kind of single day for a year or so. So it's always just been sort of quite special for me. But, you know, with that being said, I don't think it's just nostalgia. It is a genuinely good album and a really underrated one. And I think, you know, it's a bit of a shame that most people would just know Coolio from Gangster's Paradise and onwards, which just, you know, is nothing that he ever did subsequently was as good.
Apart from the Big Brother appearance, of course.
Apart from that, I just think, you know, lots of the beats on here are a kind of match for most other West Coast artists of the time. You know, they're not quite as hard as the stuff that, you know, Jinx or the Boogeymen were doing, people like that. But there's this guy Dobbs the Wino who produced, I think, either kind of all or most of the tracks on this. And yeah, he didn't seem to do kind of anything beyond this other than some work on the Gangster's Paradise album. But yeah, he's just got a really great ear for choosing really good samples, and he arranges tracks really nicely, just sort of keeps things interesting. It's not too repetitive, and kind of like some other West Coast producers, there's a fair bit of live instrumentation on there as well, sort of live bass and keys and things like that. So yeah, it's got sort of quite a unique sort of cohesive sonic sort of signature, but it doesn't really fall back on a lot of those West Coast like G-funk tropes too much.
Yeah, it has got quite kind of a fresh kind of sound,
yeah,
to it, hasn't it? There aren't many like it.
Yeah, very fresh, very funky. So yeah, it's a pretty fresh sound. Not a lot of kind of samples that are being used elsewhere, as far as I can detect, really. And then also, there are a couple. I suppose, yeah, there's like the kind of Buffalo Girls, which is like quite an obvious one.
Inner City Blues.
But he uses the inner city blues. I think it's like a replayed sort of bit of instrumentation, isn't it? And he does it in a really sort of really nice way. But also, you know, not to take anything away from Coolio, he is a really good, really engaging rapper. Like on this, I think he's got a really great voice, brilliant delivery. He's funny. He can tell stories and describe certain situations very vividly. And it's one of those albums that I've kind of talked about before, where you get these little lyrical snippets that just randomly like occur to me throughout the course of my kind of daily business, which I always think is sort of a good sign of a good lyricist, really.
Yeah, so it's sort of stuck in your head. It's got that sort of catchy, you know, memorable quality to it. Steve, what are your thoughts on this album? Is this one you were familiar with back in the day? Are you a fan of it?
Yeah, it was one that I owned, and this was the year I started to kind of buy a bit more hip hop, and it was really great to listen to this album and to reminisce. It really kind of threw me back, and but however, I think after I listened to it a few times, I remembered that I thought it was a poor album after I kind of got fed up listening to it a few times. And so, Larry, I am going to disagree with you a fair bit here. And I think apart from It Takes a Thief and I Remember, there's nothing else on the album that kind of really appeals to me. But I just want to kind of do a little aside here, because as I was like looking at this album and all the albums in this kind of World Cup, I was trying to like be really objective in how I kind of like looked at the rapping. And so I wasn't trying to like steal from your like your kind of scaled system, Larry. But I actually thought I needed to come up with my own kind of like scale for how I can like measure the rapping. So you know, like we have like a Fahrenheit scale and a Richter scale and a Geiger scale. I've decided to do my own scale and name it after a famous rapper. So I've actually chosen Coolio because I think he's just a dead average rapper.
Cooliometer.
It's like it's a Coolio scale. And it's to measure how good or how shit some rapping is. It's like a Bristol stool chart for MCs. So
right.
So I could just be a bit more objective.
Okay.
He's not the worst, but he's nowhere near the best. Like you said, Larry, he's got a nice voice. His cadence is good. But I think overall his lyricism is what I think lets him down because he's like a wannabe gangster. He kind of raps about this stuff. But when I've listened to it again, I just don't believe it. Whereas when you listen to like some of those more kind of hardcore rappers like Biggie or Ghostface, think actually, this actually just sounds like more believable. So I think he's a very average 5 out of 10 rapper.
I don't know, but to go back to that though, he's not really. I wouldn't really. He doesn't really talk about the gang banging kind of life so much. It's more sort of petty crime.
Yeah.
It's drug use and
it's so soft.
Burglary.
It's like,
He's a funny criminal.
Yeah, he is a funny criminal. Like a lot, he raps about doing funny crimes and breaking into people's houses and whatnot in an amusing way.
But that's like the ghetto cartoon track. I used to love that when I was growing up and listen to it again. I think, it's just
It's Gangster's Fairy Tale.
It is Gangster's Fairy Tale,
isn't it? I don't know how he kind of got away with that at the time.
But it is, but I do like it. But maybe I'm just got an unrealistic view of the album because I'm kind of so personally imprinted on it. But I know I did. I don't think you're mad. I gave it a proper listen to again today, and I kind of stick by it. It's got its filler, definitely. But even the lesser tracks tend to have these really kind of funky beats. Like Who's got this really funky bass line, really nice crunchy drums, and just none of it on there is terrible. And like it's got I Remember is a really good posse cut, and it's one of the definitive back in the day tracks, I think.
Yeah.
You've got Fantastic Voyage is a really anthemic kind of track.
Well, that was my introduction to Coolio. Fantastic Voyage, him riding along in that Cadillac or whatever it was. That was a big single, wasn't it? It was a massive single. I had it on CD single, but I think because it was so ubiquitous at the time, it kind of got played out. And now when I listen to it now, I kind of can't listen to it because it's the single. You know what I mean? There are tracks like that, aren't there, where you've heard them too many times. Yeah. But that was ultimately what got me into him in the first place. And it's a great track. It's a really good track. Good party jam. Yeah. But it's just funny listening to the, I don't disagree with you, Larry. It's a good album with all the right elements, that West Coast sound. Coolio is a perfectly competent rapper. And I do find though that I kind of listened to it again now for this, and it was like I was listening to it for the first time. I didn't know any of the tracks, and apart from the ones at the beginning, there's loads in the middle that I just could not remember, and it was like I was listening to it for the first time. Yeah, which kind of tells you that I haven't been tempted to revisit it more in the more recent years, and I think that probably tells you a lot about how I felt about it. Although I do remember listening to it quite a lot back in the day, which is a really weird kind of weird situation. But I think the production is great. I think it's funky, very West Coast. I think Dobbs Wino is a very competent producer. He uses a lot of those crunchy low bitrate samples that we always talk about in there in a really good way. And I love County Line. County Line is so good. Beat, brilliant chorus on it as well. Chorus, with subject matter, slick Rick. Yeah, and it doesn't outstay its welcome, nice and short. It's just a really, really good track. Yeah. And then you go through it, and you got things like Smoking Sticks are really good, really good beat. Funky. But I don't know. It just. I listened to it again and I thought, why haven't I listened to this more? Why aren't I more familiar with this album? And I think couldn't quite put my finger on it because maybe I do think a lot of Coolio's rapping and the lyrics, they kind of blend into one. It feels like he's saying the same things and talk about the same subject matters on each track. I find them hard to distinguish. Yeah. And I find it's too long as well. There's too many tracks on it. I was kind of trying to get through it, listening to all the tracks, making sure I listened to them all. I kept having to get through it and skip them and stuff. So I don't know. It just didn't. It hasn't quite got that replayability.
It's a worthy finalist. It's great to see it in the final, but
I I didn't really hesitate to put it in the list. That's the thing. It's always been one in my mind that has been one of the. Maybe I'm just listening to it with the wrong head on now. I don't know, but ultimately, I guess that's why I didn't vote for it, and that's why Casuals kind of snuck through into the next round, which we'll talk about obviously more in the next round.
Come on, y'all, get live, get down. Hip hop, World Cup. In your sound. Come on, y'all, get live, get down. Hip hop, World Cup. In your sound. Hip hop, World Cup.
But let's move on now to our second match in Group 1, which was Gang Starr's Hard to Earn versus the Beatnuts, which is the name of the album, the Beatnuts. It's not called Street Level. I heard an interview with the Beatnuts recently that's kind of been the name Street Level has kind of been embraced over the years, but the actual original name of the album was just the Beatnuts. It was just a part of the artwork.
They were asking for trouble, weren't they?
They were
putting that on the cover.
They were, and they've kind of resigned to the fact that it's called that now. But I'm not calling it that.
No.
So in this game, we had a 2-1 win for the Beatnuts over Gang Starr, with myself and Larry voting for the Beatnuts and Steve voting for Hard to Earn, another World Cup where Gang Starr gets dumped out in the early stages.
Shocking.
What is going on? They are
Prejudice.
like, one of the teams that usually gets dumped out early in the competition that I can't think of right now. But what's going on, Steve?
England, they like England.
England, yeah. So what's going on, Steve?
Honestly, I don't know what is wrong with you two. I know that perhaps it's very unfortunate that this album got picked against the Beatnuts, because I just know that's an album that you two love, and you'd have probably picked that album over pretty much anything else in this World Cup. But this album is generally considered a classic, an absolute classic album of hip hop. It has got, I always say, the greatest of all time producer. It's proper boom bap on this album. It swings, it bounces. Guru, who I think probably you would argue lets this album down, he gets 7 on my Coolio scale. His voice is good, his rap is simple, but it's so many quotables on this album.
Don't you think he sounds a bit weird on this album, Guru?
I think he probably annoys some people with his flow on this album.
Yeah.
Definitely, that's definitely noticeable. But I think he's still interesting in what he raps about. I think there's some serious gangster prejudice going on in this World Cup that we need to kind of out and do something about. It's a great it's their best album. It's a fantastic long player.
Yeah, I know it's got a really good reputation in hip hop circles. It's considered one of their crown jewels, isn't it? And so many great tracks. People put this up there with their Illmatics and your Sunrises and all that sort of stuff, and you're ready to die.
And rightly
It's
so.
madness to me.
Yeah.
But Mass Appeal is, one of the quintessential Gangstar tracks on there. It's Guru and Premier at their best. The flow on there is unbelievable. It's, Guru on that track hits 10 on my scale for his rapping. It's just absolutely crazy.
I think I didn't do himself any favors with the monotone way he raps. It's kind of very dry, quite flat.
He even references that on a track here, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He references like he says something about a monotone flow.
Right. I mean, I think the beats are great. I think DJ Premier does a lot of good work on this album. I think, like, when you look at something like Code of the Streets with that kind of, I think it's a the Herbie Hancock sample or something like that. The descending kind of string line, that's a great beat. Code of the Streets is a top track. I do like Mass Appeal as well. It's a kind of a hip hop single. It's one of those that just kind of stands the test of time. I'm using like a really, really tiny chunk of a track called Horizon Drive by Vic Juris, and it's like a really small keyboard part, and he's just took it, looped it, and it just really works so well. It's one of those you hear it instantly and you kind of think, yeah, and it gets your head nodding. And there are tracks like that all the way through this, but I don't know what it is.
Classics. Well, you got Jeru the Damaja on Speak Your Clout. On that first verse, he absolutely smashes it for the second time on a Gangstar album. He's the best rapper.
Yeah,
he's absolutely phenomenal.
You got Dwick or Dwike. That's a great track, great beat. Yeah. There's loads of them. The Planet's a good track, talking about Guru's early years when he moved out of his mum's house and stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do think this is one of their better albums. There's a lot of good stuff I do like on this. It's just it's up against the Beatnuts, and that's a top fiver for me, I'm afraid. So that's what it faced, and I'm very aware that Hard to Earn is a bona fide hip hop classic in hip hop circles. Just it didn't stand a chance for me against the Beatnuts. Larry, any thoughts on Hard to Earn?
Yeah, I mean, I just you're going to have to revoke my hip hop credentials. But I think, I just have next to no affection for Gangstar at all, like apart from a handful of tracks. And I think Guru is one of the is a sort of big part of that for reasons that we've covered. He just, I don't know, there's a track on here, Mostly the Voice. And like, ironically, for me, it is mostly the voice that puts me off, from Guru, which probably isn't an original kind of
lovely stuff
expression, but yeah, I don't know. He's just one of these people. Like when you're talking about sort of I would take Coolio over Guru like any day of the week.
No.
Just can't just think. I don't know. Just
I'm
apart
with you,
from a
Larry,
few tracks.
honestly.
Yeah.
Guru's a better lyricist. He raps about more interesting things than Coolio. He's more believable and
That
he
stuff like stuff like that is has always been secondary to me. Like I know you're more of a kind of lyrics man. You're more of an intellectual, Steve. It's it's for me it's all about the beats mainly. But I don't know.
If it's about the beats, you've got
well,
arguably the best producer in hip hop. Like one of his best albums.
Premier is obviously one of the greats, and probably in fact, definitely like a top 5 most influential hip hop producer of all time. But just for me personally, I think the bulk of his best work was done outside of Gang Starr.
Yeah,
like bar a handful of tracks. I think there's especially sort of on this album, well, his production in general, it kind of, if you like the sort of the loop that he's using or the samples he's using, then you can listen to it for 10 minutes straight and not get bored of it. If it's a sample that you don't like very much, he doesn't do very much with the song. They tend to be quite relentless, and just like quite a good example of that for me would be Mass Appeal, which I think is quite an overrated track personally. I think it sounds really good for a few bars, but then it just gets a bit too relentless and
repetitive, isn't it?
I just get bored. I think I want to make it very clear that I do think Premier on his day, there's nobody to touch him really. Like, he's unique, he's so influential. He's like the way his drums sound, like it's like he's got like a unique kind of internal rhythm or something. Just the way he swings his drums and makes them knock so hard, it should be easy to do, but when you try to do it, it's not, and he just kind of makes it sound so easy. But as I kind of alluded to already, if you don't like what it is he's doing with the track, he doesn't vary things too much, apart from have a little bit of a scratched chorus or something. It's
quite formulaic,
and then it is quite formulaic. Like sometimes the formula, it's a great formula. Like he's just got this way of chopping samples up, and it's got such an incredible ear for samples. But I don't know, his best work is outside of Gang Starr, I think, bar a few tracks.
Larry, what is your favourite Gang Starr album, Larry?
Probably the best of Gang Starr.
Which is the right answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're so it's obviously Steve's not happy about that, but it was the Beatnuts that went through against Gang Starr in that instance. So that's your winner there. Let's move on to the third game in Group 1, which was the Notorious B.I.G's legendary album Ready to Die versus another legendary album, The Sun Rises in the East by Jeru the Damaja, another primo album to discuss, boys. So in this one, there's a lot of 2-1 wins in this group. I have to say they were all 2-1. Ready to Die won this one 2-1. With in this case, it was me who was the dissenting voice. I went for The Sun Rises in the East, which may baffle you two, because you both went for Ready to Die. Yeah. Hip hop, common hip hop knowledge would say that everybody should vote for Ready to Die. But it's just an album that I never hugely connected with back in the day. So Jeru got my vote on that one. So who wants to start on this one then? Steve, are you a fan of Sun Rises in the East or not?
Yeah, I share in your disappointment this album won't be in the kind of grand final, because it is a fantastic album, but it was just coming up against an album that was just too legendary. But Larry, I don't know whether you consider this some of Premier's best work outside of Gang.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it is a bit of a half and half album. I think again, it's where kind of you either love Premier's beats on a track or you don't. And for me, I really love about half of the tracks on this and think they're incredible. I think it's weird that he produced this in the same year as Hard to Earn, because For me,
Crazy, isn't it?
the beats are just much better on this than Hard to Earn. It's a harder album.
They're a lot more interesting, the beats, aren't they?
They're a lot more interesting.
He almost,
I mean,
it's as innovative as he gets.
Yes, I think. I mean,
Like,
just going back to his drums, like on the original, I think the drums on that, and I mean the drum beat specifically, are probably my favourite boom bap drums of all time. Like, it's just so hard. That snare is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's big, isn't it? And it's like really
it's so
full.
big, and
the snare's huge. It kind of rolls, doesn't it? Kind of.
yeah, it's great. And again, it's so simple. You'd think, oh, I could get the old computer up and knock up a beat like that, but you can't do it. Like, there's just something about it that just swings beautifully. And there are quite a few, Mental Stamina is another one where it's just got these, like, one of the heaviest beats like you'll ever find. Basically, it's just so good.
Yeah, Steve, you agree with that?
What I like about the Premier Beats is that it just matches Jeru so well.
Yeah.
They're just well suited. He must have just picked out, like, yeah, this is going to suit Jeru, this is going to suit Guru. And it just kind of just nails it. It is a really short album, isn't it? It plays I think it plays really well from the beginning to the end, but it is quite short.
Yeah, I say it's something like 37 minutes, 40 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, crazily short.
But I think that counts in its favour. I think that I don't know. I'm drawn to short albums. Like, a lot of the best albums are short. They leave you wanting more. It's one of those. But I think,
yeah, and for me, it's the tracks towards the end that I'm looking forward to. There's enough at the beginning to make me want to keep listening, and then it's the end that I really look forward to. With I love Ain't the Devil Happy. I think that's probably my favourite track on there.
My Mind Spray's pretty good as well. It's one of the best uses of Nautilus.
I've written exactly like that. It's a very, very nice flip of Nautilus, a very kind of unique take on it.
Yeah, and all the little scratch samples on the hooks are just great. They work. They're perfect.
Yeah.
The subject matter for each track is on point. He's more conscious, more of a conscious rapper than a lot of people give him credit for.
He's
he
really original.
tackles lots of different subject matters. The Bitches is obviously about, scheming women who, take advantage of men. And, you got like Ain't the Devil Happy, how, black people are their own worst enemy and things like that. It's a really good album for, like, they're talking about a lot of different issues, but set to some really, really good, hard, top-notch primo beats. I just think it's for those reasons I think this is considered one of the, a lot of people consider this up there with Illmatic and things like that. It's one for the purists, I would say.
I don't think it's anywhere near as consistent as that. And I think sort of Steve, when you mentioned about sort of looking forward towards the end, I think for me personally, it's quite heavily stacked towards the front end. Like, I don't really like kind of much from Ain't the Devil Happy onwards, particularly.
Not even Come Clean?
No, I just think it just annoys me, that kind of annoying drippy kind of sound. Apart from My Mind Spray with that Nautilus flip that I really like, I think The Bitches is the last really good one. And I think on that track, that trumpet is just one of those samples where, like, when Premier found that, he must have just ran to the sampler to get that kind of down before anyone else kind of got their hands on it. It's just one of those kind of horn loops that just sort of falls from heaven, basically.
It's fantastic, isn't it? It's one of the all-time great samples. He must have been absolutely, delighted when he found that.
I'd say one that I do think is worthy of mention as well is the Perverted Monks in the House beat.
Yeah,
it's one of those unique beats it's absolutely incredible, probably the best piece of music on the album, and in fact that they used it twice, but somehow I don't think it would work with a rap on it, hence why it's only used as a skit. I can't quite put my finger on why I don't think it would work, but I think they've obviously got the same sense and just have kind of decided to use it just as an instrumental instead. I wonder if they tried and failed.
Maybe the Perverted Monks had a go, couldn't quite get it, and just let's just shout over this then, shall we? And got in the booth.
Exactly.
For me, great album, loads of good tracks. I personally, I like Come Clean. It's not traditionally the sort of hip hop song I like, but it's got this kind of, weirdly for me, it's one of those that I prefer the rapping. Like, the rapping makes it for me rather than the music. The beat is like there's nothing else like it really. It samples. I had to look this up as well because it's not that well known. It's called Infinity by Shelly Mann.
Right.
Is the track it samples for that sort of that.
It's quite well used, isn't it? By
Yeah.
if someone's going to do a freestyle, they use that Come Clean beat.
Right. Yeah. It's a freestyle classic. Yeah. And I think Come Clean is one for the Alien playlist. If you had to kind of maybe, talk about like those sort of really well known hip hop singles. I think that's
It is
it's kind of like-
absolutely
it's
classic.
For me, the downside of this album, though, I don't like the skits. I know you like that Perverted Monks one, the beat lad, but I think the skit I could do without them.
Really? Even like
yeah,
the music?
The music's all right, but it interrupts it. I'm not really. I don't like listening to people shouting and stuff. I just want to hear the tracks. But for me, obviously that's why I voted for it. I prefer it to Ready to Die. We can drill down into that, in the next round. But I think it's a much more interesting album with a higher hit rate for me. But there we go. That's just me. So that's Ready to Die through to the semi-finals.
Ladies and gentlemen,
This the damn high World Cup. This the damn high World Cup. Only the strong survive. This the damn high World Cup. World Cup. World Cup. World Cup.
And the last game in Group 1, bit of a mismatch. This one, it's Common Sense's Resurrection versus Thug Life Volume 1. Now that's an odd couple if ever I heard one. Two very different albums.
Yeah.
And this one saw a 2-1 win for Resurrection, much to Steve's disdain. Steve, you must be sick as a parrot at that. What are your thoughts? What are your emotions at this moment?
Well, as soon as this was drawn, I just groaned inwardly because I just thought, this is just my luck, really. A two-pack album reaches the final, and then it gets drawn against your two favourite albums.
A full disclosure, Resurrection is one of mine and Larry's favourite albums of all time. I'm not, I don't speak for you, Larry, but I think we do have a soft spot for this album. So
yeah,
I think Larry likes Life.
Larry's conflicted though. I think Larry's conflicted on this one.
I'm really gutted that these two came up together. To be honest,
it is a classic album, isn't it, Larry?
This is the thing. I love it. I mean, I'm gutted for me because I wanted it to kind of do better, and I'm gutted for you as well because we finally got a 2-pack album in here that, with my kind of help, could have actually done really well.
Yeah, I see it more as a Mopreem album.
Really?
No,
it's a group album. No, it is mainly 2-pack, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think
it is. I was just being silly.
Sport rappers are actually quite good on here, but
I think they are quite good.
Afterwards, they complement 2-pack really well.
Yeah.
I've got nothing against them, but they never went on, did they, to do anything else? So
no, I looked it up on sort of Spotify and things like that, and then it sort of peters out afterwards. Obviously, the death of 2-pack probably didn't help.
Yeah.
Thug Life's progression, but
I've got kind of I've got two fantasy rap albums that I like to imagine will one day be unearthed. One of them is a 1990 John Barnes album produced by New Order, and the other is Thug Life Volume 2. Like, I would absolutely love that to be in the can somewhere.
Can you imagine? Imagine if that's sitting in a vault somewhere.
It'd be brilliant, wouldn't it?
I mean, Johnny J's got it in his vault somewhere or something. Or,
yeah.
But anyway, Thug Life. I'm gutted actually also that this came up against Resurrection because
this could have gone a long way. It
could have gone a long way because I love this Thug Life album. It's like, we used to rinse it back in the day. I'm sure you did as well.
Yeah,
I'm sure you did,
definitely.
Steve, as well. It's another quite short one, 10 tracks. Doesn't outstay its welcome. Great sample, great beats. Very West Coast, but lots of energy. You don't get bored of it. Say what you like about 2-pack and his rapping. This is for me is peak Pack. It's kind of him at his very best in terms of his flow, lyrics, all that sort of stuff. Quotable.
It's like I finally get what people kind of love about Pac so much on this album.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, he's so charismatic. He's got he's so kind of passionate, and he's like no other. But for me, it really sort of came out on this album for me.
Absolutely. Steve, is this one of 2-pack's finest moments for you?
Yeah, definitely. When I do my kind of scaling, my Coolio scale, I've actually given him 9 out of 10 on this album because I just think he does reach his peak. And I think all the things that you've already said, poetic, his voice is so good. It's almost like a little bit thingy sometimes, isn't it? It's just so nice to listen to.
Very musical.
Very musical. And great sample flips, you know.
He always flies and actually lyrically he's really good on the sound. There's some classics like Bury Me a G, Brighter Liquor, How Long They Mourn Me. Those are like really interesting.
And Larry, I'm sure you want to say something about the beat at the start of Bury Me a G.
I have, I've written a bit down about this. I will never stop being fascinated by the fact that the beat doesn't loop up properly the first time around on this. It's just one of my favorite little kind of production details ever, and I just really wonder, like, why it's there. Whether it was just an error that sounded good, so they kept it in, or whether the producer wanted it to be like that, but they couldn't sort of make it work with the main sample. It's just, I don't know, like a lot of people probably just wouldn't even notice it, but I just think it's just like an exciting kind of weird little detail that I love.
Me too. I put it in my notes, but I thought I'd let you do that one. But in my head, I used to think that it did that all the way through, but it was only later that I realised it only does that on the first one.
Just the first time around.
It's just really strange, but brilliant, nice little detail, but also a really good flip of the Isley Brothers sample. And other standout tracks, Pour Out a Little Liquor, which I first heard on the Above the Rim soundtrack, but
that's
reappeared on this. It's just such a great sample. Straight Ballin', which is an Easy Mo B production, which I kind of realised.
The way that sample is just incredible. It sounds so good pitched up, doesn't it?
It does. It's fantastic. How Long Will They Mourn Me and Warren G production. Love that one.
And Nate Dogg so good on that track.
Produced by Warren G and Nate Dogg, interestingly.
Is it?
Shit Don't Stop is a good one. Aqua Boogie sample.
Such a funky bass line.
It's so good. It's a buzzy sort of Parliament Funkadelic type bass line. It's featuring YNV as well, the all-girl R&B group from there. And off the back of that track, I bought their album.
Really?
YNV. Needless to say, I didn't listen to it much at the time. But yeah, I love their work on that so much.
I really love Street Fame. I know you don't like it so much, Danny, but I just love how dark the beat is on that. It's kind of like a sort of weird bit of electronica or something.
It's a very odd, very different hip hop track, but I think that's the beat is so crap. It sounds like the sort of tracks we used to make, Larry, when we were making tunes back in the day. It sounds like something off those old tapes that we used to make.
Yeah, apparently it's the
Amen. On Casio keyboard.
Apparently it's the Amen break.
Is it?
Yeah,
really pitched out.
That's what Who Sampled says. So right. I was trying to find out where the main kind of loop was from. It didn't have any info about that. I'm sure it's a sample, but yeah, it says it's the Amen break. But who knows?
It must be really pitched down.
Yeah,
but I mean the beat's fine. It's the bass line.
I love it.
It just sounds like the sort of bass line that we would do, and we used to play on our Casio keyboards. It's really crap. And the other one I always have an issue with, and I think this is probably why would have not counted in its favour had it come up against anything else other than Resurrection. But Under Pressure's the other one I don't like. I don't like Under Pressure. Don't like Street Fame. And I think that might have damaged its chances.
Under Pressure, I realised today the final chorus is 2 minutes long.
They keep going, don't they?
Yeah, like when the pressure's on, it's a hit. He just repeats that literally for 2 minutes.
Yeah, it goes on for a while. Maybe they just couldn't be bothered to write another verse, and they just sort of let's just do the chorus for 2 minutes.
Yeah, but again, it's another one where there's just like lots of quotables, like from Tupac. I've often wondered actually whether Tupac's first words really were "thug for life" and "popper past the Mac," like he claims on one of the songs here.
Yeah, we've got no reason to disbelieve him, have we?
I also often, like it's one of those albums where like he gives lots of shout outs to like his friends who have passed away, and the one I often think about is Madman. I often wonder what Madman would be up to like these days.
Makes me wonder sometimes if Tupac's got any friends left. He's going on about all the friends he's lost.
Yeah,
I don't know, that's the life on the streets, though, isn't it?
Exactly.
All right, cool. So let's move on to the next one. So that's a 2-1 win for Resurrection. Really sorry about that, Steve, but another early exit for Tupac, another early bar.
Doesn't it?
It does.
Well, and the standard is so high in this World Cup that Hard to Earn and Thug Life are not going to be in the main final.
Absolutely, it was always going to be.
Do you think that is Thug Life is it a revered album? I don't ever really hear people talking about it. It's like it doesn't even kind of belong to Tupac's oeuvre.
Yeah, it's like a curio, isn't it? It's one of
Yeah.
it's not considered part of like you say.
Curate's egg.
I haven't read much about it. I don't see them lauding it. I know when you look at those kind of like top 40 albums from '94, it's always in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But I don't hear it being talked about in those terms. But it's just
No.
us, the real hip hop fans.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so that's those are all the matches in Group 1. The winners were Fear Itself by Casual, the Beatnuts, Ready to Die by Notorious B.I.G, and Resurrection by Common Sense. So they all go through to the semi-final in our next episode. So after this quick break, we're going to move on to Group 2.
World Cup. World Cup. World Cup. World Cup. World Cup. World Cup.
Hi, welcome back. Now we're going to look at the Group 2 games in our round of 16 for the Hip Hop World Cup 1994. The first match out of the hat in Group 2 was Paris's Guerrilla Funk versus Regulate the G-Funk Era by Warren G, an all West Coast affair, gents. And we saw Paris take this one 3-0, an absolute drubbing for the G-Child.
The first one.
The first drubbing, the first 3-0. Now, on paper, you might look at that and go, how is Paris beating a stalwart like Warren G? Massive name, massive album. So I'm going to be really interested to hear what your thoughts are on this. Let's start with you, Larry. And why did Paris get your vote over Warren G?
I think, this is about as close as you'll get to a dictionary definition of a B tier album. I think there are two really, really great tracks on this, but they both come right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then the rest of them, the fact that they put Regulate as the first track, like, they
tells you everything you need to know.
They know why people are here. Basically, it's to hear that track, and it is an all-timer. Like, it's such an incredible sample.
Yeah,
brilliant chorus, all the verses. It's one of those ones, like we said before, where you can't really trust anyone who doesn't know every single syllable.
Yeah,
to this song. Basically,
it's an all-timer.
It's an all-timer, but I think, the rest of it is just forgettable for me. It's just, I've never liked that really kind of smooth sound. He's just a bit too smooth with the sort of instruments he uses and stuff like that. And I think as a rapper, he really struggles to carry tracks himself. He's better as a kind of occasional guest rapper, like on Ain't No Fun.
That's his best moment.
That's his best moment. Like to hear that, you think, oh, can't wait to hear an album by that guy, and then when you get it, it's like, don't really care for that so much.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right though. Like, the shadow of Regulate does loom large over this album. You've got that one out of the way. Absolute monster track, and then DUC's good.
I love DUC.
It's a very simple beat, isn't it? It's the Juicy Fruit beat over Mama Used to Say by Junior.
Yes,
very simple.
It's great sample. It's really mournful.
Yeah,
and really sort of, it's like a back in the day type thing. And I've got like a weird personal attachment to that track that I won't go into, but there's like a moment in my life that I associate with it, and it's just always had like a really kind of big. It's always resonated with me for that reason.
All right, we won't draw down too far into that, Larry.
No, it's nothing particularly traumatic. It's just be a bit dull for the listener, really. But
it's something sexual, clearly. Steve, exactly, what are your thoughts on Warren G? Do you agree with that? Were you more of a fan of it than Larry?
No, I completely agree. I think it throws me back into 1994 so nicely every time I listen to it. I do enjoy going back and listening to this album, but it's like he's probably too smooth, isn't he? It's like some of his stuff is so velvety. It's just too, I don't know, just too.
It's boring, isn't it? Ultimately.
Yeah, what he does is good. That's why I can't kind of escape from. I do like this album. There are some classic tracks on it, and Nate Dogg again is consistently good, I think, on this album. And I like this DJ. I think that's really great, but it's just so velvety G-funk again.
Yeah, he went too far down the smooth route, didn't he? I mean, I loved this back in the day. I absolutely loved it. I used to play it all the time, but listening now, it's really not as good as I remember. Yeah, like you say, you got 2 tracks at the beginning that are great. Regulate, Do You See? And you've got this DJ as well. Like, as you said, Steve, it's such a great track. I had that. I had this cassette. It was I think it was a freebie with the Source. It was like Rush Associated Labels and Violator. They did like a sampler tape, and it was on there with groups like the Flatliners and Joe Sinister and people like that, like people you never heard of again. But this DJ was a standout track, and obviously really pleased when it was on this, and I had it on CD. But apart from those, the rest are pretty ropey. Like there's some absolute shite on this album. And I'm not scared to say it.
Don't say you don't like And You Don't Stop, because that's one of my favourite ones.
Well, I don't mind that one. I mean, this is a Shack I never liked.
That's
What's Next was always a bit of a crap one. And I hate the skits, do my head in. Like I used to fast forward those back in the day, but
the whole draft is funny the first time you listen to it.
Yeah, maybe. But I'd always find it funny on What's Next at the end when he spells next wrong. He says, "What's next? What's next? What's NXET?" That's one of like the biggest gaffes in hip hop history, I think. And nobody kind of, I don't know how you like hear that and not correct it or punch it back in or whatever. It's really strange.
I think that's just you, Danny. I hadn't noticed that until you.
Yeah, listen out for it. It's really strange.
I think tape just cost too much back in the old days, isn't it? It's not like your Abletons these days or whatever.
Yeah.
Pro Tools.
And yeah, he's not a great rapper. It's very simple, very basic style. It's cringy at times, some of the stuff he comes out with.
Yeah.
It's just, this is not really as good as you thought it was. Talking of Regulate, actually, earlier on, do you remember the radio version where they actually put Michael McDonald's vocals back on it?
Yes.
I heard that on the radio the other day on my way to London. I was like, why did they do this? It's like, we need to remind people what this sample is, or let's tap into some of that, magic of Michael McDonald. I don't know why they did it, why they felt the need to do it. It's very strange.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I always kind of like, am I going mad?
Yeah.
Was there a version of it where it was,
Yeah. Absolute monster track, but otherwise a very ropey album. And I think it's not any surprise it got dumped out, given our affinity for Guerrilla Funk by Paris, which we'll really get stuck into in the next episode.
Yes.
Look out for that, folks. All right, let's move on to the second game in Group 2. Okay, this is an interesting one. It's our first, I think it's probably the first soundtrack we've had on the Hip Hop World Cup, unless I'm mistaken. It's the Murder Was the Case soundtrack on Death Row versus The Main Ingredient by Pete Rock and CL Smooth. And this one saw a 2-1 win for Murder Was the Case, with myself and Larry voting for Murder Was the Case and Steve giving Pete Rock and CL Smooth the sole vote. So in that case, Steve, let's come to you first. Why does this one get your vote?
Well, I think that I need to speak to FIFA here, because I think there's some foul play at large here, because one, the soundtrack has made it into the World Cup and KMD's album didn't. And secondly, Pete Rock falls at the kind of first, I think he fell at the first hurdle in one of the other World Cups. And
I think he did.
It's him and Premier. They can't get a break, can they?
They needed to team up with better rappers. That's the problem.
This is it.
Yeah, but I think this is a classic album. I think great producer, and I think this is actually one of, like, I don't know if you would agree with me here. I think this is like one of the most soulful albums I own. It's in my eyes, it's the perfect album to have on in the background, because there's nothing that I need to kind of like turn up or turn down because I think, oh no, this track's coming, I want to listen to it, or I need to turn this track down because it's just rubbish. I think it's a very level album. It's just perfect to have in the background. I just like it all the way through. And, see how we talked about in the previous episodes, he's not the best rapper. He'd probably get 6 out of 10 on my Coolio scale.
Oof.
Which is harsh, but he's lyrically he's better on here, and he does flow okay on here. And Pete raps a tiny amount on here, and he's a bit better. His voice sounds a bit better. And kind of really topically, there's loads of like Biz Markie samples, which Danny, you said that to me a while ago. It's like, oh yeah, crikey, there's so much Biz Markie sampled on here.
Rest in peace.
Got royalties just galore from this. So yes, I think it's just a very level album, a very good album, and I'd just be interested to know why you two couldn't vote for it, really.
Can I just shock you? I absolutely love this album. Absolutely love it. For me, obviously I'm a bigger fan of the beats than the rapping, but this is peak Pete Rock. This is exactly the sort of Pete Rock I love. It's my favourite era of his. It's around the time he did this, his stuff on Illmatic, and then he did his stuff on AZ's album. And for me, and around that time, he was untouchable. His stuff was just right up my street. The beats, the drums he would use, the samples he would use. It was unlike anything else, and like that's what cemented him as one of my favourite producers. As you say, Steve, very smooth, very soulful album, a lot more soulful than the first album. Loads of really great jazz samples, soul-led beats, amazing beats. And also he's got, it shows you the depth of his crates that he puts those little instrumental interludes in between every song. Like some of his like unused beats, obviously, puts them in between. I love those. I loved some of those more than I love the actual tracks. But again, it's the same thing with Mecca and the Soul Brother. I think it's let down by CL Smooth. I don't think he's a very engaging rapper. I don't really like the way he flows. There's something about it, and I never quite put my finger on it. I don't know whether it's the tone of his voice or whether it's his cadence.
Quite ordinary. His voice is very ordinary, I think. There's nothing stand out.
It's the way he structures his sentences and stuff like it. I don't know what it is, but I just can't get with it. But then when Pete Rock steps up to the mic,
he doesn't do anything complex, Danny. He doesn't do anything complex.
No.
He doesn't change his style ever. It's always he's the most simple rapper. He's probably more simple than Coolio, actually.
But he seems to pack a lot of words in. He says lots, but I never really know what it is he's saying. It's very strange, a very strange style. But then when Pete steps up to the mic, for some reason it just really it really connects with me, really engages. He's kind of got this amateurish charm, which I think I mentioned last time. And I don't know, I think he just understands the sort of the entertainment factor of rapping more than CL does. Like he really makes it count. Like every line he spits, you can almost hear him trying to prove he's a good rapper. Yeah. And there's something about that I quite like. And loads of standouts. Carmel City, love that beat, very smooth. I Get Physical is probably one of my favourite hip hop tracks. In terms, beat wise. And there's one I never really realised I liked as much as I do. It's called In the Flesh. It's towards the end. It's a really nice sort of smooth jazzy loop. It's almost like a posse cut. I think they get I on there, and really, really nice. The only downside I would say, apart from CL Smooth as a rapper, is Pete, he kind of uses some rather obvious samples that were being used quite a lot back in the day. Like he falls back on things like Places and Spaces by Donald Byrd, Rising to the Top, Kenny Burke, and there's obviously Searching by Roy Ayers is on here as well. These are got absolutely rinsed, and they weren't particularly original back then, let alone in the intervening years. So, I said that's a really strange criticism, but I don't know, I heard them back then on this album. I was like, I've heard that sample before. But, he's kind of counterbalanced by all the amazing original samples he's found and all the crate digging he's done for all the other tracks. So I'm not going to criticise too harshly for that. But otherwise, really, really solid album, right up my street. Love Pete Rock, but, not quite good enough to beat Murder Was the Case, which I played a hell of a lot more back in the day, and I still play it to this day. And we can really get involved in that.
Interestingly, I think this album could hold its own in the final, whereas Murder Was the Case is just going to get rinsed in the first round. It hasn't got a hope.
Yeah, you may well be right. Larry, what are your thoughts on the Pete Rock album?
Yeah, it's not a favourite of mine, to be honest. I can't sort of quite articulate why I don't have more time for it. I think, in fact, there's probably a parallel universe in which it's one of my favourite albums by one of my favourite groups.
Yeah.
But I just can't get excited by it. And I think CL Smooth is definitely the biggest part of that. I just don't like him at all. And I'm going to upset you here. I just find Pete Rock's beats on here just generally a bit boring. It's a bit of a kind of gangster. They're kind of the parallel gangster. They're the smooth, jazzy gangster. And I feel a deep shame for not liking either of them, but I just can't quite get with this album. I just immediately want to kind of skip every track for some reason.
Yeah,
I can't really explain to you why. Like on paper, I should have the same reaction to it as you do, but I didn't have it back in the day. I didn't sort of get it again when I kind of when I got back into hip hop in the early 2000s, and now it's just it's just too late for me to kind of get into, really.
Yeah, well, fair. It's quite surprising though, because I know you're a big fan of Pete's Instrumentals, and this is.
I love Pete's
find this
Instrumentals.
quite
I think
similar.
It is quite similar, and in fact, I think he sort of repurposes at least one thing from this on Pete's Instrumentals when I was listening back to it earlier.
Yeah, I think you could be right.
But yeah, there's just something about it. Find it very hard to explain, but it's just quite. It's a bit mushy sounding, and just nothing sticks out for me about it. It's weird.
All right, well, that's fair enough. So you'll be pleased then that it got knocked out in the first round 2-1 by Murder Was the Case soundtrack. Steve, you can give us your thoughts on why you don't think that should be in our next episode.
Come on, y'all, get live, get down. Damn high, won't come in your sound. Come on, y'all, get live, get down. Damn high, won't come in your sound.
Let's move on to the third match in Group 2 now, which is a biggie. It's Word Life by OC versus Illmatic by Nas. For many people, the best hip-hop album of all time.
Nasty Nas, I call him.
Nasty Nas, yeah, to his friends.
Yeah.
Steve, I can see you making some weird faces in the Zoom screen. Do you want to tell us how you're processing this one?
Oh, it's just a crying shame, isn't it? That Word Life is an absolute class album. OC is a proper lyricist. He's a proper skilled rapper.
Yeah.
I just feel so sorry this album isn't the final.
Well, let's sorry, I should just say actually before you go on, that the Illmatic won this one 3-0. Absolutely trounced OC. Took another whitewash 3-0 for Nas. Sorry, you want to go on, Steve?
Yeah, and I think this album potentially could have beaten almost any other album in this World Cup apart from Illmatic. That's how I kind of feel, and that's why I just feel it's such a tragedy. Can we not create a best loser and get this one through to the final, because
some sort of third place playoff?
And everything about this album is brilliant. The rapping and the production, the ITC, Buckwild is the main producer on here, isn't he? He really shines and marries up really well with OC. And I just like every single track on this album. There's nothing I don't like on this album. I don't know.
No weak tracks? Any weak tracks?
Not for me, no.
Nothing. So Larry, what are your thoughts on OC then? Did it deserve the drubbing, or was it closer than it should have been?
It certainly didn't deserve drubbing, but for me, it's another one that I just didn't have at the time and didn't get back into it subsequently. So although it's got all the right ingredients for me to kind of love it, I've just never really sort of got past much what I think are the standout tracks, like the ones that hit me instantly. Time's Up being the obvious one, and Born to Live, and a sort of a few other ones that I really like. But yeah, just never kind of really got into it at the time, and yeah, just can't really latch onto it now. But I do agree with all the things Steve said about it. The production's great. He is a really good rapper, but I just don't have it as sort of a connection with it. Essentially,
Can we just talk about Time's Up, because
let's drill down to that.
His rapping on there is nearly unbeatable.
Yeah, it's pretty flawless.
On there, and he changes his cadence. It's just it is just unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable.
It's brilliant. He's so angry.
One of the best opening lines ever as well.
Yeah, just fantastic. Just he's so his flow on that is so memorable. He's really angry, but just the wordplay is brilliant, and everything about it, and also the beat produced by Buckwild. Yeah. Really simple. When you hear the original track he sampled, it's quite a simple flip, but it just for some reason just really works on that, and it works.
It's really quite. It's like a David Axelrod sample or something, isn't
like
it?
That. It's A Day in the Life, I think it is. It's some big band leader type track. It's weird. I'm gonna look that up, but
it's so perfect. It's unlike. It's a really unique sample as well. It's so dark and sinister, and there's nothing kind of quite like it.
It is, and it is the perfect one because it's been remixed so many times. Because the rapping is obviously brilliant, but it never sounds better than it does on the original track. It meets it so well.
I also really like.
It's A Day in the Life by Les DeMerle.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but it's remarkably similar to. I think it's just a loop. It's remarkably similar to the to what OC raps over.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't need to do anything with a loop. Like you just ruin it by messing about with it.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. Time's Up's one I would put on an Alien playlist.
Yeah.
It'd probably be track in the first couple of tracks. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I really like Born to Live, which I know uses. I think it's this Kenny Burke sample again, isn't it?
But in a better way.
But you can't go wrong with that sample. You really can't. And I think now that you mentioned on the main ingredient using searching, is searching used on this album as well somewhere, like a few tracks later?
Yeah, but interestingly, it's the live version,
right? Yes,
of it on Point of Views. It's him live at Ronnie Scott's. I think.
Ronnie Scott's,
which is really interesting. You can hear him talking on the loop.
Oh, right,
fascinating. That was always fascinated me what that has.
Yeah, it's a really nice use of that sample in a kind of interesting way. Yeah, and also the outro just gets an automatic 4 out of 5 for the Phaso sample. Right,
of course, yeah, and you just bang that on your album. You've gone up a couple of points.
Can't go wrong, can you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is one of my favourites. I used to absolutely love this album. It's like a perfect example of the DITC sound, perfect example of the Buck Wild sound. This is some of his best work, I think, but it's topped off by the fact that I think OC's an amazing lyricist, as we've discussed with Time's Up. It's one of those. He's just got such a great flow, a really clear way of communicating. His cadence is like just sometimes a rapper just speaks to you or they don't, and OC is one that I'm just on board with straight away.
He changes his cadence so nicely, and actually some of his content matter, and the other tracks are really interesting, like Go Ahead and No Main Topic.
Yeah.
It makes you want to listen to those tracks. Just it's not like a Coolio album where, like you said, it's just like petty thieving or whatever it is.
Yeah, he covers a lot of different topics, doesn't he? And Go Ahead is just brilliant. I think that's Lord Finesse. That's one of his best.
That is the only Lord Finesse
beats. He does all that sort of drum roll thing, the snare roll in and stuff that the DITC crew do a lot, which I love. Yeah. It's just a really good sound.
Is OC kind of, would you say, like one of the lesser known kind of DITC rappers?
I think so. I don't think he gets his flowers. I don't think he really does get his props.
It's all sort of big, it's all Big L this and Fat Joe that, isn't it, really?
It is. Maybe if OC had did, he would have got a few more props, but it's just
quoted, isn't he? Which is quite a compliment. Rapper.
I think he's a rapper's rapper, isn't he?
He is a rapper's rapper. Yeah, he just went about his business quietly, knocked out this album, then he knocked out another one, Jewels, which I think it was 97, which would have been in my 97 list had we done one, which is fantastic. Like even post Golden Era, in my opinion, still a great album with loads of great beats on it, but we're not talking about that one. But
he did an album as well, Danny, with Apollo Brown, which Larry might know, called Trophies in 2012, which is absolutely superb album.
Wow. Okay, is it worth checking out?
Definitely.
Sounds like it. Cool. Okay. Well, so rather inevitably, then it was a 3-0 win for Illmatic. We can talk more about Illmatic in our next episode in the semis. Let's move on to our fourth and final game in Group 2, which saw House of Pain's Same As It Ever Was come up against Method Man's Tikal. Would never have put these two together, but that's the drama of the World Cup. Yeah. Larry, do you want to go first on this one? We've got let's just let you know that it was a 2-1 win for Tikal, Method Man's Tikal. With you two voting for Tikal and me being the sole vote for Same As It Ever Was. So let's talk about Same As It Ever Was then. Larry, what are your thoughts on this album?
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because I've just realised that I've written no notes about it at all. I did sit down to do my notes, but when I go to look at them now, there are none there. So I must have got sidetracked for some reason. But I'll try and freestyle my thoughts in a rap style.
Top of the dome.
Off the top of the dome, just flipping the script, and yeah, it's kind of it's a decent album, isn't it? I think it's I much prefer it to their first album, which is just sort of quite forgettable. I think it's one of those albums where I don't know, you could, in a positive or negative way, it's quite, all the tracks are kind of hewn from the same cloth, aren't they? Basically, they all, which is to say, they all sound exactly the same. Basically,
yeah.
Like there's quite heavy. I don't know where he gets all his like double bass samples from. There's an awful lot of them. I reckon he's probably just. It's probably it's all like a Ron Carter album or something.
Yeah, he does a
like
kind
that,
of
maybe.
He does like a solo.
Just dug into.
Yeah, he does a solo and he just uses the same notes or something, like in the same. Plays them on a keyboard or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Maybe, but yeah, yeah, quite possibly. But yeah, like he's got quite a distinctive style, like Lethal has on this. Well, him and Muggs, but yeah. Heavy on the double bass and little sort of horn stabs, basically. And when it works really nicely. But there's quite a lot of filler on the album as well, to be completely honest.
Yeah, there is. What are your standouts though? That's what some of your standout tracks.
The one that I really like is Where I'm From.
Okay,
like that's a 5 out of 5 track for me. Like I've kind of got a bit of a personal attachment to it, and I don't know, it's just, again, it's one of those sort of back in the day tracks that I always seem to be attracted to, the sort of back in the day kind of subject matter. This is a really good example of it. This podcast is one big back in the day track, isn't it? Really, if you think about it, yeah. So I love that. It's got a really good beat to it as well. The beat on it is quite. It's made of similar stuff to the rest of them, but it's elevated. Like if all of the tracks on there were as good as that, it would be a kind of stone cold classic, I think. Who's the Man's really good as well. Always love that. It Ain't a Crime is good. It's the kind of nice story kind of track with a
Sounds
good beat.
Too much like Cypress Hill though, that track, I think.
Yeah, it's very Cypress Hill.
Yeah, it is. Is it a Muggs? Is it a Muggs produced track?
I think so. I think it's all Muggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's Muggs and Lethal, isn't it?
Yeah,
but it's all, Soul Assassins. It's a lot of it sounds very similar. But yeah, there's just looking at the old True Score system and how that's interpreted these. There's lots of kind of lots of 3.5s, 3.75s, and then a few kind of 4 and 5s. But very little, kind of very few 2s. So it's pretty consistent.
So unlucky to go out, really. It's quite narrow. I
think so. I love Takal, basically. So
yeah, fair enough. Steve, House of Pain, talk to me.
Yeah, well, I'm going to disclose that this is an album I didn't know, and so I had to listen to it. And actually, I think it's really good. I think it's an album I've slept on. I don't really know why, because I know the first album, and I just don't think I kind of carried on to listen to this one. I think Everlast is a good rapper. He gets kind of 6 on my Coolio scale.
He's got a good voice, hasn't he?
He's got a really distinctive voice, isn't he? It's kind of like a bit
like gruff. A growl. It's a growl.
Yeah,
I love Everlast's rapping style. I love his voice.
Yeah.
I love the way he raps. It's so simple, and it's as close to catchy as you can get with a rapper. It's like his flow just makes it easy to remember the lines. And that's why Jump Around has endured. That's why On Point endures, because you remember the lyrics because of the way he delivers them. They're very easy to say.
I wrote exactly that in my notes now. His rhymes are really good, and he just he's able to kind of swing really well between his verses. I think he's good. And Danny Boy, he seems like a good compliment to the group as well. But I definitely felt the same as you, Larry. This was it. It's a good long player. It's consistent, but just so samey. And the trouble with this album is there're just no great tracks. It's just all samey. maybe apart from, I like the I'm a Swing It track, which I think is probably the popular track, but maybe that's because I haven't listened to it as much as you, but I thought that's a good track.
Yeah, well, I'm a Swing It. I want to talk about I'm a Swing It because I love that. I don't think there are many tracks that get you nodding your head quite as instantly as I'm a Swing It. The minute it comes on, it's something about that.
Yeah.
Dum, it's just it's simple. It's an abject lesson in, or was it object lesson in hip hop simplicity? Just beat
and you can hear the 12 bits of the SP 1200 on that as well, can't you?
Yeah, it's just it's so good. But also there's lyrically it's pretty good as well. There's loads of really quotable lines where he talks about I'm not like Phil Collins, I'm more like Henry Rollins. I love that line. And then there's towards the end there's a really vicious diss of DJ Quick. I don't know if you heard that, Larry. It's really worth listening to.
No, I didn't actually.
He absolutely lays into DJ Quick at the end of that track, talking about going to a swap meet to get his hair and his nails done and stuff like that. It's fantastic.
Right.
Listen to it again with that hat on. The other one I wanted to mention was Word Is Bond, which is a Diamond D production.
Yes.
Which at the time, this made real waves at the time because it was considered a really, really great track. Great sample, really nice bass line on the chorus. The samples he cuts up for the hook it's genius, absolute genius. So that was always one I loved back in the day. And on the opening track, Back from the Dead, I love with that trumpet sample. Just great start to an album, and you know instantly where you are with it. You know, it sets its stall out right from the start.
It's a good cover as well.
Just go back to Word Is Born. That sample is really soulful, and it kind of like the aggressive like samples in the chorus are a really like nice compliment. I thought that was really cleverly done. It's almost
a really weird little kind of almost like a choir kind of sample. It's weird. It's like an angelic voice soaring over the chorus. It's really interesting, but fundamentally a real good Diamond D beat as well. You can hear his sort of fingerprints all over it. So yeah, love that track. I mean, I do think this is a bit of a surprise entry in the 94 World Cup, if I'm being honest. When you consider the caliber of the others, I did think it was a bit strange that this got in and things like Curious didn't. But it got the votes, you know, that's how it works. You know, enough of us voted for it to get in, and you can't argue with that. I think.
Did you know that? Sorry to interrupt. Did you know that Everlast was part of the Rhyme Syndicate?
Ice-T's gang.
Right. Yeah.
No.
Apparently he was in that, and he was also like he says that he was around when Straight Outta Compton was being made. Like he was. Yeah. Apparently he was like opening up for kind of, you know, various big acts like NWA and Ice-T at the time, and was around that kind of around them when that was being made.
Cool. Yeah, so he's got hip hop chops. Then he's
got credentials.
He's got credentials in the right place at the right time. So just to round up then on Same As It Ever Was, good album, good Muggs production. It's probably not. It's probably a bit too simple to be considered, one that hip hop purists are going to like. And I don't think Everlast is particularly respected as an MC, but there's something so irresistible about the way he raps. And when you combine that with the kind of simplicity of the beats and the bass lines and stuff, it just makes a really enjoyable album. Yes, probably a bit long. Yes, probably a bit repetitive, but just solid. And I think we always like this one. I always like this one more than probably I otherwise would have back in the day. But inevitably came up against Method Man, and you two are big fans of that, as you will no doubt express in the next episode. Tikal goes through to the next round, and that brings us to the end, chaps. That was round one. 8 hard fought matches there. The winners that are going through, just to recap, are Casuals, Fear Itself, Common Sense's Resurrection, The Beatnuts and the Notorious B.I.G, Ready to Die, Method Man's Tikal, Murder Was the Case soundtrack, Illmatic by Nas, and Paris's Guerrilla Funk. Really strong lineup, chaps. This is going to be a massive show, the next one, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to have knocked out some of the albums in this round, like just shows you how incredible the albums that are going through to the final are.
Absolutely. Steve, final thoughts before we head off into the sunset?
I can't wait for the draw, to be fair. I want to see who comes up against who, and I think it's going to be nearly impossible to choose the winner, but can't wait.
Until then, hit us up on Twitter and Instagram. Let us know whether you agree or disagree with any of the stuff we've been spouting in this episode. We're at Hip Hop World Cup. Or if you just want to share your thoughts on 90s hip hop in general, come and see us there. But for now, thanks for listening. And until the next time, we're ghosts like Patrick Swayze. Peace.
A battle to the death. Classic albums clash until there's only one left. A killer contest, but before we get to it, there's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it. 8 classic albums, 1 classic year. Draw 'em out the hat and chew the fat right here. We rate 'em, we slate 'em, discuss 'em and debate 'em, analyze the beats and quote the lyrics verbatim. When all is said and done, we put it to the vote and tell you which of them has won. Then it's to the semis and the final for the final cassette or CD. So who will it be? We going all in, so on the sound of the whistle, let the games begin.
Rolling, and I'll cut one in. As it Paul Daniel says.
Yeah. I'll do one that you
Still
can
rolling.
cut this in later.
Come on, help us get that trunk out. Okay. Right.